Do you know what the difference is between a 70-year-old man who walks upright, with purpose in his eyes and respect in his voice, and another man of the same age who lives bitter, sick, and forgotten by everyone? It's not luck, it's not money, it's not even genetics. It's something much deeper, something you built or destroyed every day of your life without realizing it. And today, in this moment, as you listen to me, you are deciding what type of old man you will be. A strong, wise, and dignified one, or a weak, resentful one full of regrets. Because let me tell you something nobody tells you. Old age doesn't surprise you. Old age is the exact result of how you lived every previous decade. And if today you don't have a plan, if today you don't understand the fundamental principles that every man needs to build a solid life, then you're already walking toward a painful ending. But relax, because in the next few minutes I'm going to share with you the teachings of one of the most brutally honest philosophers in history, a man who understood human nature better than almost anyone, Baruch Spinoza. And I'm going to do it in such a clear, practical, and direct way that when you finish watching this video, you'll understand exactly what to do today, so that in 20, 30, or 40 years, you'll be that man everyone respects. So stay until the end, because principle number 9 can literally save you from a miserable old age. Look, I have to start by telling you something harsh but necessary. Most men reach old age completely destroyed, and I'm not just referring to the body, although that's also a brutal reality for many. I'm referring to something worse. They arrive empty inside, without purpose, without dignity, without respect, neither from others nor from themselves. They spend their last years watching television, complaining about everything, blaming the government, the economy, their family, God. They become a burden to others. They lose their independence. And the saddest thing of all is that they feel life betrayed them, when the truth is, they betrayed their own life decades earlier. Why does this happen? Because we live in a culture that teaches us to chase immediate pleasures instead of building inner strength. They teach us to work for money, but not to develop wisdom. They teach us to compete, but not to know ourselves. They teach us to consume, but not to create. And the result is devastating. Men in their 40s, 50s, 60s who never developed self-discipline, who never cultivated their minds, who never worked on their character. Men who lived on autopilot, letting themselves be carried by society's currents, by others' expectations, by their own uncontrolled impulses. And when old age arrives, when the body begins to fail, when opportunities diminish, when energy decreases, these men realize something terrifying. They didn't build anything solid. They don't have inner peace. They don't have wisdom to share. They don't have their children's respect. They don't have deep relationships. They don't have a legacy. They only have regrets and excuses. But here's the good news, and listen carefully. It doesn't have to be this way. No matter how old you are now, whether you're 20, 30, 40, 50, or even 60, you still have time to change the trajectory of your life. You can still build the foundations you need for a strong, dignified, and respectable old age. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. Now, before getting into the specific principles, I need to talk to you about Spinoza, because this man lived more than 300 years ago, but he understood truths about human nature that are as relevant today as they were then. And best of all, he wasn't an ivory tower philosopher. He was a practical man, a lens grinder who earned his own money, who rejected fame and wealth to live according to his principles, who faced rejection from his community and yet maintained his integrity until the last day of his life. Spinoza taught us something revolutionary, that true freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want in every moment, but from understanding your nature and living in harmony with it. He taught us that uncontrolled emotions are chains that enslave you, and that reason, self-knowledge, and discipline are the keys to freedom. He taught us that you're not a victim of the universe, but part of it, and that you have the power to transform your suffering into strength if you learn to see things clearly. And this is crucial for our conversation today, because if you want to reach old age being strong, you need to understand that strength isn't something you have or don't have. It's something you build day after day, decision after decision, thought after thought. It's the result of principles applied consistently over time. So, without further delay, let's get into these principles. And I ask that you not just listen, but really reflect on each one. Ask yourself honestly where you stand in each area of your life, because transformation begins with truth, not with illusions. The first fundamental principle that every man needs is self-mastery. And when I say mastery, I don't mean repressing yourself or punishing yourself. I'm referring to something much deeper, knowing yourself so well that you can direct your energy, your impulses, your desires toward what really matters instead of letting them direct you. Think about this for a moment. Every day you face hundreds of small decisions. Do you get up when the alarm sounds, or do you hit the snooze button 5 more times? Do you eat what you know you need, or what you crave in the moment? Do you spend your money on things that bring you closer to your goals, or on fleeting pleasures? Do you invest your time in growing or in entertaining yourself? Each of these small decisions seems insignificant in the moment, but multiplied over years and decades, they completely determine who you are and where you end up. Spinoza understood this perfectly. He said, "We are slaves to our passions until we learn to understand them." And a man who doesn't control his impulses, who lives at the mercy of every craving, every emotion, every distraction, that man will never be free. He'll be like a leaf blown by the wind, always reactive, never proactive, always justifying why he couldn't do what he knew he should do. Let me tell you about 2 men I knew. Let's call them Robert and Michael. Both were the same age, worked in the same place, earned the same, but their lives took completely different paths for one simple reason: self-mastery. Robert was a man of impulses. If he felt like buying something, he bought it. If he felt like eating junk food, he did it. If he felt tired, he cancelled his commitments. If something bothered him, he exploded. He kept saying, "That's just how I am. I can't change." And for years, this seemed to work. He had his job, his family, his routine. But with each passing year, the consequences of his impulsive decisions accumulated. Debts grew, health worsened, relationships deteriorated, and when he reached 60, he found himself alone, sick, financially broke, and bitter. His lack of self-control had built a prison from which he could no longer escape. Michael, on the other hand, took a different path. He wasn't perfect. He had the same impulses, the same cravings, the same temptations. But he understood something crucial, that every time he chose his long-term vision over his immediate pleasure, he became stronger. Every time he got up early, even though he didn't feel like it, he was training his will. Every time he saved money instead of spending it, he was building his future. Every time he chose the difficult conversation instead of avoidance, he was strengthening his relationships. And when Michael reached 60, he was a completely different man. He had health because he had consistently cared for his body. He had mental peace because he had learned to manage his emotions. He had financial security because he had been disciplined with his money. He had deep relationships because he had invested time and energy in the people who mattered. And most importantly, he had dignity and respect, both from others and from himself. The difference between these 2 men wasn't luck. It was self-mastery. And this leads me to ask you, in what areas of your life are you being like Robert? Where are you choosing immediate pleasure over long-term good? Where are you letting your impulses control you instead of controlling them? Because here's the truth, mastering yourself isn't built in a day. It's built in 1,000 small moments of conscious choice. And the good news is that every time you choose correctly, you become stronger. Your capacity for self-control is like a muscle that grows with use. The second principle is emotional strength, and this is something most men completely misunderstand. Many think being emotionally strong means not feeling, being tough, repressing everything. But that's not strength, it's disguised fragility. A truly emotionally strong man isn't the one who doesn't feel, but the one who feels deeply but isn't controlled by those emotions. Spinoza had a brilliant perspective on this. He said that emotions themselves aren't the problem. The problem is when we don't understand them. When fear paralyzes you because you don't recognize it. When anger consumes you because you don't know where it comes from. When sadness sinks you because you think it will last forever. But when you understand your emotions, when you can observe them without being dragged by them, Then you have power over them. Think of a man who loses his job. One can let himself be consumed by shame, resentment, despair. He can sink into self-pity and remain there for months or years, blaming others, feeling like a victim. Another man feels exactly the same emotions, the same blow to the ego, the same fear of the future, but does something different. He recognizes those emotions, accepts them as valid, but doesn't let them define his actions. He allows himself to feel the pain, but then asks himself, what can I do now? What's in my control? This is the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic, impulsive, controlled by emotion. Responding is conscious, deliberate, informed by emotion, but not controlled by it. And a man who learns to respond instead of react is a man who can face any storm without breaking. But here comes something you need to understand that very few men comprehend. Emotional strength doesn't mean you never break. It means that when you break, because we all break at some point, you know how to rebuild yourself. You know that emotions are temporary, that pain passes, that you can grow through suffering instead of being destroyed by it. I've seen physically strong men, professionally successful, socially admired, completely collapse when they face a loss, a failure, a rejection. Why? Because they never developed emotional strength. They never learned to process pain. They never cultivated the capacity to be alone with their dark thoughts without fleeing toward addictions, distractions, or denial. And this is one of the main reasons so many men reach old age bitter. Because throughout their lives they accumulated emotional wounds they never healed, resentments they never released, traumas they never processed. And all of that becomes a heavy burden they carry until their last days, poisoning every experience, every relationship, every potential moment of peace. So, how do you build emotional strength? First, by being brutally honest with yourself about what you feel. You can't heal what you don't recognize. Second, by learning to sit with discomfort without fleeing. Meditation, reflection, time alone. These aren't wastes of time, they're training for your mind. Third, by seeking help when you need it. Talking with a trusted friend, with a counselor, with someone who can offer you perspective isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And fourth, and this is crucial, by reinterpreting your painful experiences. Spinoza believed we can transform our suffering when we understand it as part of a larger process, when we stop seeing it as personal punishment and start seeing it as an opportunity for growth. It's not about superficial positive thinking, it's about finding meaning even in pain. Now wait, because the third principle is absolutely critical, and many men ignore it until it's too late. Financial discipline. And I know you might have expected something more spiritual or philosophical, but let me tell you something. Money isn't the most important thing in life, but the lack of money in old age can completely destroy your dignity, your independence, and your peace of mind. I've known brilliant men, good fathers, honest workers, who reached 60 or 70 years old with nothing saved. And not because they were poor all their lives, but because they never developed financial discipline. They earned well, but spent everything. They bought things to impress people who didn't matter to them. They lived beyond their means. They assumed there would always be time to save later. And then one day, when the body can no longer work like before, when opportunities diminish, when medical expenses increase, they realize they're completely dependent on others. And that dependence, my friend, that loss of autonomy, is one of the hardest blows to a man's dignity. Spinoza lived extremely simply. He rejected a prestigious university position because he valued his freedom more than status. He earned enough grinding lenses and that was sufficient for him, not because he was poor in spirit, but because he understood that true wealth is freedom, not accumulation. Now, I'm not telling you that you should live like a monk. I'm telling you that you need to be intentional with your money, that every peso, every dollar, every euro you earn is a seed you can plant for your future or waste in the present. And the decisions you make today, in this moment, are directly determining your quality of life in 20 or 30 years. Think about this. A 30-year-old man who saves just 10% of his income consistently, who invests wisely, who avoids unnecessary debts, reaches 60 with a solid financial foundation that gives him options, freedom, security. He can choose where to live. He can pay for his medical care. He can help his children if they need it. He doesn't have to depend on anyone. Meanwhile, a man of the same age who spent everything, who went into debt to maintain a lifestyle he couldn't sustain, who never thought about tomorrow, reaches 60 completely vulnerable. Any emergency is a catastrophe. He can't retire. He has no options, and that lack of options creates constant stress that affects his health, his relationships, his mental state. And here's the most tragic part. The difference between these two men wasn't that one earned much more than the other. It was simply that one was disciplined and the other wasn't. One valued his future as much as his present. The other only lived for today. So ask yourself honestly, are you building financial security, or are you postponing it? Are you spending everything you earn? Do you have debts you shouldn't have? Are you investing in your future or only in immediate pleasures? Because the time to act is now, not when it's too late. The fourth principle is physical health, and this is another where men tend to brutally deceive themselves. Many think, I'm young, my body can handle it, I'll worry about it later. And then later arrives, and the body no longer responds like before, and the accumulated damage is irreversible. Your body is the vehicle that will carry you until the end of your life. And just as you wouldn't expect a car you never change the oil on, that you always fill with poor quality fuel, that you drive carelessly to work well after 20 years, you also can't expect your body to work well if you treat it badly for decades. Spinoza understood the deep connection between body and mind. He didn't believe they were separate things, but aspects of the same reality. Your physical state affects your mental state and vice versa. A sick, weak, inflamed body full of toxins creates a foggy, depressed, anxious mind, while a strong, vital, well-nourished body creates a clear, stable, capable mind. And this becomes absolutely critical in old age. The difference between a 70-year-old man who walks kilometers without problem, who has energy to play with his grandchildren, who sleeps well, who thinks clearly, and another of the same age who can barely move, who lives with constant pain, who depends on multiple medications, who has brain fog, that difference was built decade after decade of small decisions. Every meal you eat is a decision. Every time you choose to move or stay sitting is a decision. Every hour of sleep you allow yourself or deny yourself is a decision. And these decisions accumulate in a compound way, exactly like money in an investment account. At first the differences are small, almost imperceptible, but over time they become enormous. Let me tell you about Carlos. When he was 40, he was the typical man who worked too much, ate badly, didn't exercise, slept little. He said he didn't have time to take care of himself, that he'd have time when he retired. His body started sending signals, a bit of excess weight, some high blood pressure, back pain, but he ignored them. That's just life, he said. At 50, the signals became alarms, type 2 diabetes, heart problems, chronic pain. But even then, although he took medications, he didn't fundamentally change his lifestyle. He kept eating badly, kept being sedentary, kept sleeping little. At 60, Carlos was completely limited. He had had a heart attack. He had multiple chronic conditions. He couldn't do the things he wanted to do. His quality of life had dramatically reduced. And the worst part is that he knew deep down, that this was the direct result of decades of negligence. Now, think about Andrew. At 40, he made a different decision. He realized that if he wanted to reach old age strong, he needed to invest in his body now. He started simple, daily walks, more nutritious food, sleeping 8 hours. Nothing extreme, just consistency, and he gradually increased. Strength training, better nutrition, stress management. At 60, Andrew was a completely different man from Carlos. He had the energy of someone 20 years younger. He didn't need medications. He could do everything he wanted to do, and when his friends asked him his secret, he simply said, I decided to take care of myself 20 years ago. The difference between these men wasn't genetic, it was choice. And you're making that choice every day, in every meal, in every decision to move or not move, to sleep well or stay up late. Now, the fifth principle may surprise you, but it's absolutely fundamental. Mental clarity and cultivation of the mind. Because you can have a healthy body and money in the bank, but if your mind deteriorates, if you lose your clarity, your memory, your ability to think, then you lose your essence. And here's something you need to understand. Mental deterioration isn't inevitable. Yes, the brain ages, but the idea that we all must become confused, forgetful, or mentally slow in old age is a myth. The brain is plastic. It can grow and create new connections until the last day of your life, but only if you use it. Spinoza dedicated his life to deep thought, to study, to contemplation. Not as an escape from reality, but as a way to understand it better, and he died mentally sharp until the end, despite living only 44 years, because he valued mental exercise as much as physical. But we live in an era where most men are actively destroying their mental capacity. We spend hours consuming garbage content on social media. Our attention span has reduced to seconds. We rarely read anything deep. We rarely think in a sustained way about something difficult. And then we wonder why we feel confused, why we can't concentrate, why our memory fails. Your mind, like your body, needs exercise. It needs challenges. It needs to grow. And if you don't use it, you lose it. It's that simple. A man who stops learning at 30, who stops reading, who stops thinking deeply, who stops challenging his ideas, that man is paving the way toward mental decline. But a man who keeps his mind active, who learns constantly, who reads, who reflects, who exposes himself to new ideas, who maintains deep conversations, that man can reach 80 years old with a sharper mind than many 30-year-olds. And this doesn't require being an intellectual or academic. It can be learning a new trade, mastering a skill, understanding how something works, reading biographies of people you admire, studying practical philosophy, learning a language. What's important is the process of challenging your brain, of keeping it active and engaged. Additionally, mental clarity has another critical component: inner peace. A mind constantly agitated by worries, resentments, anxieties cannot think clearly. It's like trying to see the bottom of a lake when the water is turbulent. Only when you calm the waters can you see clearly. And here Spinoza offers us a powerful tool: perspective. When you understand that you're part of something bigger, that your individual problems are small in the grand scheme of the universe, they don't disappear, but they stop consuming you. When you understand that most of the things that worry you are outside your control, you can release that anxiety and focus on what you can control. This isn't resignation. It's wisdom. It's the ability to distinguish between what matters and what doesn't, between what you can change and what you must accept. And a man who develops this wisdom lives with much more mental peace than one who constantly fights against reality. The sixth principle is having a purpose bigger than yourself. And this, my friend, is perhaps the most important of all for a strong and dignified old age. Because you can have health, money, a clear mind, but if you don't have a reason to get up every morning, if you don't have something that gives meaning to your existence, then old age will be a period of terrifying existential emptiness. I've seen this again and again: men who worked all their lives, who defined themselves by their careers, who put their entire identity in being providers, and then they retire and fall into deep depression because they no longer know who they are. Their purpose was completely tied to their work role, and when that role disappears, they feel lost. Spinoza taught us that the highest purpose of the human being is to understand their nature and live according to it, to contribute to the well-being of the community, to seek truth. This sounds abstract, but it translates into something very concrete. You need something bigger than your own needs to give meaning to your life. It can be your family, but not just providing for them, but really being present, being a model, transmitting wisdom. It can be a cause you care about, a way to contribute to your community. It can be creating something that lasts beyond you, art, knowledge, a business that helps others, mentorship for the next generation. What's important is that when you look in the mirror at 70, 80 years old, you can say, "My life mattered. I made a difference. I left the world a little better than I found it." And that sense of meaning, of having lived with purpose, is what sustains you when everything else fails. I know a man named Edward who throughout his professional life was an accountant. Stable job, well paid, but not particularly exciting. But Edward understood something crucial. His job was just his livelihood, not his life purpose. His purpose was to be the best father possible, to be present for his children, to teach them values, to spend quality time with them. Additionally, Edward always dedicated time each week to working with at-risk youth in his community, teaching them practical skills, being a mentor, showing them that someone believed in them. He didn't do it for recognition or money. He did it because he felt it was his contribution to the world. When Edward retired at 65, he didn't fall into depression. His identity was never completely tied to his job. He had deep relationships with his adult children who respected him and sought his advice. He had purpose in continuing to mentor young people. He had projects that excited him. His life had meaning before retirement and continued to have it afterward. Compare this with James, who put everything into his career. He was a successful executive, well paid, professionally respected. But he sacrificed his family for work. He barely knew his children. He had no hobbies. He had no real friends. His entire identity was his title at the company. When James retired, he collapsed. He had no close relationship with anyone. His wife was practically a stranger after years of neglect. His adult children saw him as someone who was never there for them. He had no interests outside of work. And suddenly, without that work role, he felt completely empty. Who was he now? He had no answer. This is the difference between having a superficial purpose and a deep one. A superficial purpose evaporates when circumstances change. A deep purpose endures because it's rooted in who you are, not in what you do. So ask yourself, what is your purpose beyond earning money? What are you building that will last longer than you? What difference are you making in others' lives? If you don't have clear answers, then you need to start looking for them now, because when you reach old age, this will be the difference between a life that feels complete and one that feels wasted. Now let me talk to you about the seventh principle, and this is deeply important. Deep and meaningful relationships. Because you can have everything else, but if you're alone, if you don't have real connections with other human beings, old age will be a period of unbearable loneliness. And here's a brutal truth that many men learn too late. Relationships aren't built when you need them. They're built decades before. A man who spends his life being selfish, who only approaches people when he needs them, who doesn't invest time and energy in his relationships, that man reaches old age completely alone. Spinoza, although he lived much of his life in relative isolation due to his radical thinking, maintained deep correspondence with thinkers across Europe. He had true friends who valued his mind and character. He didn't have hundreds of superficial acquaintances, but he had real connections with people who understood him. And this is what you need to understand, quality over quantity. You don't need 1,000 friends. You need a few true ones, people with whom you can have real conversations, who truly know you, who are there in difficult moments, not just in good ones. But building this type of relationship requires vulnerability. It requires time. It requires effort. It requires that you be genuine, that you really care about others, that you're willing to give without always expecting to receive. And especially for men, this can be difficult. We're taught to be tough, independent, not to show weakness. And the result is that many men reach 50, 60 years old without a single deep friendship. They have work colleagues, gym acquaintances, neighbors they exchange greetings with, but no one with whom they can have a real conversation about their fears, their dreams, their struggles. And when a crisis arrives, when they lose their partner, when they face an illness, when they need emotional support, they realize they're completely alone. And that loneliness, especially in old age, is devastating. But there's also the other side of relationships, family, and here I need to be brutally honest with you. If you neglect your family for decades, if you prioritize work over quality time with your partner and children, if you're never emotionally present, then you can't expect them to be there for you in your old age. I've seen bitter men complaining that their children never visit them, never call. But when you look at their history, it turns out they were never really present in their children's lives. They were physically there sometimes, but mentally absent, emotionally distant. And now they're surprised that the relationship is cold. The relationship with your partner is especially critical. If you spend decades taking your wife for granted, if you don't invest in the relationship, if you don't grow together with her, if communication is superficial, then in old age you may find yourself living with a stranger. Or worse, alone, because she got tired of the lack of real connection. But a man who consistently invests in his relationships, who is present, who listens, who genuinely cares, who maintains connections even when it requires effort, that man reaches old age surrounded by love. He has children who want to spend time with him, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. He has a partner with whom he's built decades of memories and deep connection. He has friends who are there. And this network of relationships not only makes old age more pleasant, it makes it safer. When you face difficulties, you have people who care. When you need help, you have someone to turn to. You're not navigating the last part of your life completely alone. So, how are your relationships now? Are you investing in them, or are you neglecting them? When was the last time you had a real deep conversation with someone? Are you present with your family or just physically there while your mind is at work or on the phone? Because the time to build these relationships is now. Every day you postpone, every opportunity for connection you waste, is determining how alone or accompanied you'll be in your last years. The eighth principle is learning to handle failure and adversity, because life will inevitably hit you. The question isn't whether you'll face failures, losses, disappointments. The question is how you'll respond when you do. Spinoza faced brutal rejection. His own community excommunicated him. His ideas were censored. He lived in relative poverty. He died young, but he maintained his integrity, his peace of mind, his commitment to truth until the end. How? Because he understood that suffering is an inevitable part of existence, and that our response to suffering determines who we become. Many men are destroyed by failure, a business that goes bankrupt, a marriage that ends, a betrayal, a financial loss, and they never recover. They cling to resentment, to bitterness, to the victim's story, and that narrative becomes their identity, poisoning everything that comes after. But other men face similar or worse failures and emerge transformed, not because it didn't hurt them, but because they chose to learn, grow, adapt. They saw failure not as the end of their story, but as a difficult chapter that would eventually lead to something new. The difference is in perspective. Do you see failure as evidence that you're inadequate? Or do you see it as feedback, as information about what didn't work, as an opportunity to adjust your approach? Do you see adversity as unjust punishment? Or do you see it as part of the growth process, as the fire that forges steel, as the resistance that makes muscle stronger? I'm not saying you should pretend pain doesn't hurt. It hurts. Losses hurt. Failures hurt. But you can feel the pain without letting it define you. You can acknowledge the difficulty without giving up. You can mourn the loss and still find the strength to move forward. And this becomes especially important in old age because losses accumulate. You lose physical abilities you once had. You lose people you love. You lose roles that defined your identity. If you haven't developed the capacity to handle these losses with grace and resilience, old age will break you. But if you've cultivated this strength throughout your life, if you've learned through previous failures that you can survive, adapt, find new meaning, then you can navigate the inevitable losses of old age without losing your essence. Think of two men who lose the ability to play the sport they loved all their lives. One becomes completely bitter. He feels robbed. He resents his body that betrayed him. He stops doing anything physical because he can no longer do what he did before. He gets depressed and gives up. The other feels the same pain, the same loss. But after processing it, he asks himself, what can I do? How can I adapt my passion to my new capabilities? And he finds new forms of movement, perhaps gentler, but equally meaningful. He coaches others in the sport he can no longer practice. He finds different, but equally valid meaning. This capacity for adaptation, this resilience in the face of inevitable change, is what separates a bitter old age from a dignified one. The ninth principle, and pay close attention because this can literally change your life: true independence. And I'm not just referring to financial independence, although that's part of it. I'm referring to something deeper, the ability to be who you are without constantly needing external validation, approval, permission. Spinoza demonstrated this radically. When he was offered a prestigious position with the condition that he moderate his ideas, he rejected it. He valued his intellectual freedom more than social recognition. He lived according to his own principles, not according to others' expectations. And this is crucial because many men live their entire lives trying to impress others, to meet expectations they never chose, to keep up appearances. They buy houses bigger than they need to impress neighbors who don't matter to them. They work in jobs they hate for status. They make decisions based on what others will say instead of what's right for them. And the result is a life that was never really theirs. And when they reach old age and look back, they realize they lived a life others expected of them, not the one they wanted to live. True independence means that your decisions come from within, from your values, from your understanding of what's right for you, not from fear of judgment, not from seeking approval, not from constantly comparing yourself with others. It means you can be happy with less, if less is enough for you, without feeling you need to compete in the materialistic race. It means you can take the road less traveled if it's right for you, without worrying that others don't understand. It means your self-esteem comes from within, from living according to your principles, not from external achievements that can be taken away at any moment. And this becomes especially important in old age because many of the external sources of validation disappear. You no longer have the impressive work title. You no longer have the physical strength of your youth. You no longer have the attractiveness you once had. If your self-worth was tied to these external things, their loss leaves you empty. But if you built your sense of worth on something deeper, on your character, on how you live, on your principles, then these external losses don't destroy you. You still know who you are and what you're worth, regardless of what the mirror shows or what your business card says. A truly independent man can say no when everyone else says yes. He can go against the current when he knows it's right. He can admit when he's wrong without feeling his worth is at stake. He can receive criticism without collapsing. He can receive praise without inflating, because his center is in himself, not in the fluctuating opinions of others. How are you doing in this? How many of your decisions are driven by what others will say? How much of your self-esteem depends on external validation? Are you living your life or the life others expect of you? The 10th principle is consistency, and this is absolutely fundamental to everything else. Because you can have the best principles, the best intentions, the best plans, but if you're not consistent in applying them, they mean nothing. Transformation doesn't come from one day of heroic effort. It comes from small actions repeated day after day, year after year, decade after decade. Spinoza didn't write his masterpiece in a week of intense inspiration. He built it patiently, day after day, thought after thought, revision after revision. Greatness is the result of ordinary consistency, not occasional extraordinary moments. And this is what most men don't understand. They look for quick transformation, the magic solution, the shortcut. They want the results without the process. They get excited about a new idea or goal, work intensely for a week or a month, and then give up when they don't see immediate results. But the reality is that everything worthwhile in life requires long-term consistency. Your health is the result of what you eat, how you move, how you sleep, consistently for years. Your financial situation is the result of how you spend and save, consistently for years. Your relationships are the result of how you treat people, consistently for years. Your character is the result of your choices, consistently for years. There's no escape from this truth. And the good news is, you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to do everything perfectly every day. You just need to be consistent in your efforts. You can have bad days, you can fail sometimes, but if you get up and continue, if you maintain the general course, consistency will take you where you want to go. Think about the difference between two men who want to get in shape. One starts with enormous enthusiasm, goes to the gym 2 hours daily, does a strict diet, is completely committed. For 2 weeks. Then he gets exhausted, gets bored, gives up. And he repeats this cycle several times over the years, always starting with great energy and quitting shortly after. The other starts more modestly. He goes to the gym 3 times a week, 30 minutes. He makes small but sustainable changes to his diet. He's not perfect. Some days he skips it, sometimes he overeats, but overall he maintains consistency. And he does this not for 2 weeks, but for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. Guess which one ends up in better shape? The second one, without a doubt, because he understood that transformation is a marathon, not a sprint. That imperfect consistency beats inconsistent perfection. And this applies to everything in life. It's better to save a little each month for decades than to save a lot for a few months and then nothing. It's better to spend regular quality time with your family than big occasional promises you don't keep. It's better to work on your personal growth a little each day than to wait for the perfect motivation that never comes. Consistency also builds something else, reliability. A consistent man is a man others can trust. He does what he says he'll do. He keeps his commitments. He's not perfect, but he's predictable in his integrity. And this builds respect, both from others and from yourself. When you look in the mirror and know you're consistent in your principles, that you stay true to yourself even when it's difficult, even when no one is watching, that builds a deep sense of self-respect that no amount of external achievements can provide. So ask yourself, in what areas of your life are you consistent? Where do you start with great enthusiasm but quickly abandon? What small actions could you do consistently that accumulated over years would transform your life? The 11th principle is the legacy mindset, and this goes beyond simply having a purpose. It's actively asking yourself, what will remain of me when I'm no longer here? What impact will I have had? What teachings, what values, what example will I leave? Many men live without ever thinking about their legacy until it's too late to build a meaningful one. They live only for the present, for their own needs and desires, without considering what trace they'll leave in the world. But a man who lives with a legacy mindset makes different decisions. He doesn't just ask, what do I want now? But how will this affect the people who come after me? He doesn't just think about accumulating wealth for himself, but about what values and wisdom he'll transmit to his children. He doesn't just work for a paycheck, but thinks about what contribution he's making. Your legacy doesn't have to be big in the public sense. You don't need to be famous or write a book or build an empire. But you do need to leave something positive. It can be children you raised well, who carry your values into the world. It can be people you mentored, whose lives you changed with your guidance. It can be a business you built that continues helping others. It can simply be the example of how you lived, with integrity, with kindness, with strength. Think about the men you've most admired in your life. You probably don't admire them for how much money they had or what positions they achieved. You admire them for how they lived, for the values they demonstrated, for the impact they had on you and others. That's their legacy. And you're also building yours every day, whether you know it or not. So, what do you want people to say about you when you're no longer here? What do you want your children to remember? What mark do you want to leave? And more importantly, are you living in a way that builds that legacy? Because here's the truth, your legacy isn't created in your last years. It's created in every decision you make now, in how you treat people today, in what you prioritize this week, in the values you demonstrate with your actions, not just with your words. The 12th principle is cultivating inner peace and acceptance. Spinoza called this the intellectual love of God, or understanding your place in the universe in such a way that you can accept what is without constant resistance. Many men reach old age full of bitterness because they spend decades fighting against reality. resentful that life didn't turn out as they expected, angry with people who hurt them, clinging to things from the past they can't change. And all this resistance, all this resentment is a poison that consumes them from within. But inner peace doesn't mean passive resignation. It means deeply understanding the difference between what you can control and what you can't. It means releasing what you can't change so you can put all your energy into what you can change. It means accepting that life includes suffering, loss, injustice, but that you can still choose how you respond. A man with inner peace can be in the middle of a storm and maintain calm, not because nothing affects him, but because he has a stable center that isn't shaken by every wind. He's made peace with his past, with his mistakes, with his losses. He doesn't deny the pain, but he doesn't cling to it either. And this is something you need to actively cultivate throughout your life. It's not something that just happens. It requires constant practice of releasing, of forgiving, of accepting, of reinterpreting. It requires that you actively work on healing your wounds instead of letting them become infected. Because every resentment you hold is a weight you carry. Every grudge, it should have been different. Every denial of reality is a chain that binds you. And if you carry these chains for decades, old age will be incredibly heavy. But a man who has learned to release, who has forgiven, not because others deserve it, but because he deserves peace, who has accepted his complete history with its highs and lows, its successes and failures, that man reaches old age light. He can look back without bitterness. He can look forward without excessive fear. He can be present without torturing himself with past or future. What resentments are you carrying? What aspects of your past haven't you accepted? With whom do you need to make peace, including yourself? What do you need to release to find peace? The 13th principle is maintaining humility and the capacity to learn, because pride and mental rigidity are enemies of wisdom and continuous growth. I've known men who at 40 already considered themselves experts in everything, who stopped listening, learning, considering they might be wrong. They became rigid in their opinions, closed to new ideas, defensive about any suggestion they could improve. And these men, no matter how many years they live, stopped growing decades before they died. But I've also known men of 70, 80 years old who are still curious, who keep asking questions, who admit when they don't know something, who are willing to change their minds when presented with new information. These men are wise, not because they know everything, but because they understand how much they don't know. Spinoza, despite his brilliance, maintained intellectual humility. He was willing to revise his ideas. He exchanged letters with other thinkers, seriously considering their objections. He didn't pretend to have all the answers. And this humility is crucial for several reasons. First, it keeps you growing. Second, it makes you easier to adapt to a changing world. Third, it makes you more pleasant to others, because nobody enjoys being around someone who acts like they know everything. Fourth, it protects you from big mistakes because you're willing to consider you might be wrong before it's too late. A humble man can ask for help when he needs it. He can admit mistakes. He can apologize sincerely. He can learn from younger people, from different backgrounds, from experiences different from his. And all these capacities make him not only wiser, but more connected with others. The 14th principle is active gratitude. And I don't mean a fleeting feeling of how nice when something good happens. I mean deliberately cultivating a deep appreciation for what you have, for what you've experienced, for the people in your life. Because bitterness in old age almost always comes from focusing on what's missing instead of appreciating what's there. The bitter man focuses on the opportunities he missed, on the betrayals he suffered, on what others have that he doesn't. The grateful man focuses on the lessons he learned, on the relationships he has, on the experiences he lived, on the very fact of being alive. And this isn't being naive or denying the negative. It's a deliberate choice of where to put your attention, because you can find both things to be bitter about and things to be grateful for in any life. The difference is where you decide to focus predominantly. I know a man who lost much in his life. He lost a son in an accident. He lost his business in a recession. He lost his health in an illness. And yet, when you talk to him, what you feel isn't bitterness, but a deep peace. Because he chose to focus on what he still has, his wife who was with him through everything, other children he loves, the beautiful memories of his deceased son, the lessons he learned from his failures, the simple fact of being able to walk, breathe, think. This gratitude didn't arise naturally. It's a practice he cultivates every day. He literally takes time each morning to list things he's grateful for, and this has completely transformed his life experience. Because gratitude does something powerful, it changes your perspective from scarcity to abundance. Instead of constantly seeing what's missing, you start to see what you have. And this abundance perspective not only makes you happier, it makes you more generous, kinder, more attractive to others. The 15th principle, and perhaps the most difficult of all, accepting your mortality and living accordingly. Spinoza was very clear about this. A wise man doesn't think about death, but he doesn't deny it either. He understands that his time is limited, and this gives him urgency to live well now, not someday indefinitely in the future. Many men live as if they're going to live forever. They postpone important conversations. They postpone dreams. They postpone making peace with people. They say someday, but that day never comes. And then one day they realize they're running out of time, and panic or regret consumes them. But a man who has accepted his mortality lives differently, not in a morbid or depressive way, but with clarity about what really matters. He doesn't waste time on trivial things because he knows his time is limited. He doesn't postpone saying, "I love you," because he knows any day could be the last. He doesn't leave conflicts unresolved because he understands the time to resolve them is finite. This acceptance of mortality paradoxically makes life richer, not less. When you know this won't last forever, you appreciate each moment more. When you understand that the people you love won't always be there, you value them more. When you recognize that your opportunity to make a difference is limited, you act with more purpose. And in old age, this acceptance allows you to face the final stage of life without the terror that paralyzes many. You can look at death, not as a terrifying enemy, but as a natural part of the cycle, as the end of a journey you lived as best you could. Now, let me pause here and ask you to honestly reflect on everything we've talked about. Don't just continue automatically. Stop. Really think about your life in this moment. Are you living with self-mastery, or do your impulses control you? Do you have emotional strength, or do you collapse at every difficulty? Are you building financial security or living day to day? Do you take care of your body, or are you slowly destroying it? Do you cultivate your mind or let it atrophy? Do you have a purpose bigger than yourself, or do you just exist? Do you invest in deep relationships, or are you alone surrounded by people? Do you learn from failures, or do they destroy you? Are you independent in your thinking, or do you live for others' approval? Are you consistent or just enthusiasm without follow-through? Do you think about your legacy or only about today? Do you have inner peace or live in constant conflict? Do you maintain humility, or have you become arrogant? Do you practice gratitude or only see the negative? Have you accepted your mortality, or do you live in denial? These questions aren't comfortable, but they're necessary, because the truth, although uncomfortable, is the only thing that can free you. The lies you tell yourself that everything is fine, that you have time, that you'll change later, those lies are what lead you to an old age of regrets. And I know that perhaps right now you feel overwhelmed. Maybe you're seeing all the areas where you failed, where you're not living up to these principles. And that's normal. Nobody is perfect in everything. Not even Spinoza, who dedicated his life to philosophy, achieved perfection in everything. But here's what's important. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to start. You just need to choose one area, perhaps the most urgent for you, and start working on it. Because a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the transformation of an entire life begins with a single conscious decision. If your health is destroyed, you don't need to transform into an athlete overnight. Just start walking. Eat one healthy meal today, sleep well tonight, and tomorrow repeat. And the next day, repeat. Consistency in the small leads to transformation in the large. If your finances are a mess, you don't need to get rich immediately. Just make a budget. Save something, even if it's little. Stop buying unnecessary things. And maintain this consistently. Over time, things will improve. If your relationships are broken, you don't need to fix everything at once. Just make one call. Start one honest conversation. Ask for forgiveness where necessary. Show you care. And build from there. What's important is to start now. Today, not some magical Monday in the future, not when you have more time, more energy, more motivation. Now. Because every day you postpone is one less day you have to build the life you want, to become the man you want to be, to prepare for a dignified and strong old age. And let me tell you something else. You're not alone in this. We're all trying to improve, to grow, to be better versions of ourselves. We all struggle with self-discipline, with fears, with temptations, with mistakes. The difference between those who reach old age strong and those who arrive destroyed isn't that some never fail and others do. It's that some keep getting up every time they fall and others stay on the ground. So get up. Every time you fail, get up. Every time you deviate, return to the path. Every time you give up, start again. Because persistence, the ability to continue despite difficulties, is perhaps the most important principle of all. Now, I want to share with you a vision of two possible futures, two versions of you at 70 or 80 years old. And I want you to clearly see the difference, because this isn't abstract. This is your future reality that you're creating now. In one future, you're a 70-year-old man who is physically weak. Decades of negligence have taken their toll. You have multiple chronic conditions. You take a handful of medications every day. You can't do the activities you enjoyed. You depend on others for many basic things. Financially, you're in trouble. You never saved enough. You live on a minimal pension that barely covers expenses. You constantly worry about money. You're a burden to your adult children who have to help you. Mentally, you're confused. Your memory fails. You can't concentrate. You never cultivated your mind, and now it's deteriorated beyond what's normal for your age. Emotionally, you're bitter, full of resentments, angry at the world, blaming everyone except yourself. Your relationships are cold or non-existent because you never invested in them. You have no purpose. Your days are empty. You're just waiting for time to pass. You feel useless, worthless, a burden. You look back at your life with deep regret. You see all the missed opportunities, all the stupid decisions, all the wasted time. And the worst part is, you know deep down that this didn't have to be this way, that you had opportunities to change, that you simply didn't. This is one future, and it's real. It's where millions of men end up. Not because they were bad people, but because they weren't intentional about building something better. But here's the other possible future. You're a 70-year-old man and you're in the best shape someone your age can be. Yes, your body has aged, but it's strong. You walk, you move, you have energy. You took care of your health for decades and now you're reaping the benefits. You don't need medications. You sleep well. You feel good. Financially, you're secure. You're not necessarily rich, but you have enough. You saved and invested wisely. You don't worry about money. You can enjoy your life. You can help others if you want. You're independent. Mentally, you're sharp. You keep learning, reading, thinking. Your mind is clear. You can hold deep conversations. You're still curious about the world. Emotionally, you're at peace. You've healed your wounds. You've released resentments. You've forgiven, including yourself. You can feel emotions deeply without being controlled by them. You have deep relationships. Your adult children respect you and seek your advice. Your partner is your true companion after decades together. You have real friends. You're not alone. You have purpose. Maybe you mentor others. Maybe you're still working on something you're passionate about. Maybe you simply enjoy being present with your family. But you have reasons to get up every morning. When you look back, yes, there are things you would have done differently, but overall, you're proud. You lived with integrity. You made a difference. You left a legacy, and you can look ahead without excessive fear. You've made peace with your mortality. When the end comes, you'll be able to say you lived well. This is also a possible future. And the difference between these two futures isn't luck. It's not genetics. It's not circumstances completely beyond your control. The difference is the decisions you make day after day, year after year. So, which future are you building? Be honest with yourself. Based on how you live now, on your current habits, on your current priorities, which of these two futures are you heading toward? And if you don't like the answer, if you realize you're heading toward the first future but want the second, then you need to change course. Now. Today, not tomorrow. Because here's the final truth that Spinoza understood deeply. You are free. Not completely. There are things outside your control, but within the limits of your circumstance, you have more power than you probably recognize. Power to choose your thoughts, your actions, your responses. Power to build, to grow, to transform. And the fact that you're here, listening to this until the end, tells me something about you. It tells me there's a part of you that wants more, that wants to be better, that knows you can do more with your life. And that part, that desire for growth, that's the seed of your transformation. Now you just need to water it, nurture it, protect it, because the world will give you 1,000 excuses not to change. Life will present you with difficulties. Your own mind will tempt you to return to old habits. But if you keep that vision of who you want to be alive, if you return to these principles again and again, if you get up every time you fall, then transformation isn't just possible, it's inevitable. So let me end with this. If this video resonated with you, if you felt that something here was true for you, then don't let it be just a fleeting feeling. Take action. Choose one principle, the one you need most now, and start applying it today. Not everything at once, just one, and build from there. And please, if this message helped you, like this video, not for me, but so the algorithm shows it to other men who need to hear this. Subscribe to the channel because we're going to continue exploring these deep ideas that can transform your life. And leave me a comment telling me which of these principles impacted you most, because I want to know what resonated with you. But more important than anything you do on this video, the most important thing is what you do after you close it. Because you can listen to Spinoza's wisdom, you can understand these principles perfectly. But if you don't apply them, if you don't live them, then they change nothing. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. But knowledge with action is transformation. So get out of here and transform your life. Build that strong future you deserve. Become that man who reaches old age with dignity, with respect, with peace. Not by luck, but by design. Not by accident, but by conscious choice repeated day after day. You have the map now. You have the principles. You have the vision. Only one thing is missing: your decision to walk the path. And believe me, in 10, 20, 30 years, when you're that strong man others admire, you'll look back at this moment and you'll be glad you started. You'll be glad you made the difficult decision to change when you still had time. Because the perfect moment to start never comes. There's only this moment, now. And what you do with it will determine everything that comes after. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening until the end. And above all, thank you for having the courage to look at yourself honestly and seek to be better. Now go and build a life you can be proud of.